to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Tuesday night / evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Only 14 minutes past the hour of 11 p.m. So, see, trying to live to those expectations of keeping time based on what I did promise in as far as broadcasts are concerned. So, do bear with me tonight. Like I said, it's a pleasure to be back. Good to have you all. For those of you that will be joining us, our conversation tonight, sorry, it started off with a quick notification here that I thought I should tend to. Anyways, it's all good. So we are back again. I hope you had a wonderful Tuesday. It's been a bit of a hot day across, some parts of the country here in Uganda, some downpours in the afternoon around Kampala and things like that. So overall, it's been an okay day. Tonight, we'll be speaking about the under 15, the ongoing under 17 World Cup that is ongoing there in Qatar. And we'll be talking about, because today the final games of the group stages were played. And we have some big news, some big news in as far as Uganda is concerned, because they did beat up against France to qualify for the round of, more. We did. Uganda beat up against France to qualify for the round of 32. So, really impressive stuff there, that I must say. Hi, I'm trying to read your name. Excuse me, as I try to figure out what the correct pronunciation is for that name. Yes, your name is Mola. Allow me to call you Mola because really, it's a bit of a tongue twister, the first name there. Hi, Mola. Where are you joining us from? Good to have you on the channel, on the broadcast this evening. Do let us know where you're joining us from. But more importantly, do not hesitate to leave us a like on this broadcast, as well as a subscription to the channel, Mola, in case you're new to the community. So, for those of you that are just joining us, kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel if you're new here. Like I said, our focus tonight will be on the FIFA Club World Cup, and then we'll get to speak about, the international, the international break as it is and everything it has to offer. But I want to say thank you so much, Team India, for the love and support that you've rendered me on this channel. Thank you so much, Team India, for the love and support. Then Yellow Dayak from Malaysia, greetings to you too. I hope you're doing well. LFC from Ireland, and every single one of our regular suspects. Pedri from Spain there. We do not take your love and support for granted at any given point in time. Anyways, I hope I'm audible enough. I hope you're getting clear sound. Because sometimes, there are echoes, there's things like that, and I depend on your feedback to know that everything is going on the right track for purposes of our broadcast. So let's get it all started. Like I said, the final games of the group stages were played today to determine the teams that qualify for the round of 32 in as far as the FIFA World Cup under 17 tournament is ongoing or goes. And today we had Canada beat up against Chile. Canada received a red card in that game, while Uganda Cranes beat up against France by 1-0. That goal scored by James Bogere in the 18th minute of the game was sufficient to see the Uganda Cranes beat up against France by 1-0 to qualify for the round of 32. Now, even though they beat up against France, as we will see, they still finished third. So they qualify as one of the third best placed teams because of France's better goal difference. So you had France and Uganda tied on 4 points from that group. And then, of course, they did advance, like I said, or they get to advance on having that, on finishing as one of the third best teams. But before I explain that in its entirety or how we arrived to that, allow me complete the round of results of today's games. Uzbekistan beat up against Panama by 6-1. Ireland and Paraguay, that one ended in a goalless draw. Burkina Faso beat up against Tajikistan by 2-0, while United States of America beat up against Czech Republic by 1-0. Mali beat up against Saudi Arabia by 2-0, while Austria beat up against New Zealand by 4-1. Now, here is how we get to the round of 32. For those of you that are not aware, FIFA expanded the World Cup competitions from 32 teams to 48 teams, starting with these, of course, junior tournaments. And of course, we will get to see that at the bigger stage of the World Cup, the main event of the men's FIFA World Cup, and next year in the summer, that the competition will be hosted across 3 different countries. That's the United States of America, Mexico, and Canada. So that's where the tournament will be hosted, and it will have 48 teams. Now, because there are 48 teams, all those 48 teams are grouped in 12 groups. Now, in each of those 12 groups, we get, after 3 games played, we get 2 teams from out of each that qualify for the round of 32. Now, in total, 2 times 12 is 24. So because we need an extra 8 teams, we go back within the 12 groups and find at least 8 teams that will have finished third best in comparison across all the 12 groups. So that means we get another 8 that join the 24 to make the round of 32. Then at the round of 32, it's a knockout phase, as would be the traditional round of 16. So this time around, we have a round of 32. Teams get to play each other in the knockout phase. Then we go to the round of 16, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and eventually the finals. So this is a tournament that is going to climax within this very month, before the end of this month, really. So games are going to come a little bit thick and fast. So, and on that note, therefore, Uganda has done history. First of all, the Uganda Cubs, that's the under-17, made history when they became the first Ugandan football team to qualify for a World Cup tournament. They had to go through, the playoffs to earn that 10th place, that sent them to the World Cup, that is being played over there in Qatar. And then they've gone on to make history. Beating up against France is not an easy task, but more importantly, it comes against the most familiar, the most unlikely opponents of the competition. Because let's be honest, Uganda is a little known country. We know that our senior team has never qualified for the World Cup. The best we've done at AFCON was reach the semifinals. When you go back, I think the semifinals, and when back in 74 and 78, and those things like that. And then it took us, I think, a period of about 39 years until we qualified for our first AFCON, in between 78 and I think 2016, when we went for AFCON 2017, and then eventually went for AFCON 2019 that was hosted in Egypt, then missed the subsequent tournaments, and now we missed the subsequent editions, and now we get to go back, in AFCON 2025 that will be played in Morocco starting December 21st, so we're looking forward to that. So this under-17 team has done really, really a lot of history by Uganda standards. But later on, beating up against France is not a kind of result that any of us or many of us would have seen coming on a given day. First of all, it was a very crucial game in the sense that Uganda needed to, the only way they would advance was by winning. Nothing shy of a victory would have seen them, advance. So particularly, without looking at all the groups, let's draw focus particularly on Uganda there. Unless any of you has a particular interest in a particular country, then I can also shed more light on that. But when you look at the Uganda Cubs, they've been in Group K, where you have France, where you have Canada, where you have Uganda and Chile. Now, what did happen is that all the teams have 4 points in that group. All teams have 4 points. Now, with those 4 points, France top the group because they have a positive goal difference, while Canada, who come second, and Uganda, who come third in that group, have 0. In other words, they do not have a leftover in terms of their goal difference. Hi, Daniel Tuton. It's a pleasure to have you back. It's been a while, my brother. Daniel Tuton, good to have you back. It's been a while. I hope you've been okay. Whatever it is that kept you away, I hope you've been succeeding. I hope you've been winning. I hope it was for good reasons. I oftentimes say that when people disappear on me on this channel, it's either of a couple of reasons. One, either it's school or work, depending on their age group. 2, illness or family issues, those kinds of things. But I hope everything is okay with you. I have a football tournament. Oh, how is it going? How is the football tournament going? So, anyways, back to the gist of the conversation of the Uganda Cubs. So they get to qualify as one of the 3rd best teams, and they qualify for the round of 32. Now, here are the teams that have officially qualified for the round of 32, and those fixtures will be played quite very, very soon. And before we advance to other stages of the tournament. So quickly to run through them. We have Portugal, we have Argentina, Italy, Brazil, Zambia, Austria, USA, Republic of Ireland, Belgium, Japan, Senegal, Croatia, South Africa, Egypt, Venezuela, Switzerland, Korea, then Korea DPR. I think Democratic Republic of Korea, I hope that's the translation of it. Then you have Morocco, you have Germany, you have Colombia, you have Tunisia, you have England, France, Canada, Uganda, Uzbekistan, Paraguay, Burkina Faso, Czechia or Czech Republic, and then you have Mali and Mexico. So those are the teams that have qualified for the round of 32 in as far as the under 17 World Cup is ongoing. Hi, Sophie O'Brien. I love football. Thank you. Well, you're in the right place, Sophie, if you do love football. So welcome to the Football Tribe UG community. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you're new, if it's your first time here. But also, please like the broadcast. I can see your people here on the broadcast, but only 3 have liked. So please leave me a like on the broadcast there as you continue to engage. Then the other thing I wanted to tackle on or to touch on is particularly to do, again, still within the context of the tournament. You say, I had my year 11 test. Hope you excel in that test. Daniel, hope it went well for you, So yeah, many of our colleagues have been away. And for example, LFC, who is a very, very regular guy here, always chips in between school and stuff. Same thing goes for Pedri. Safa Ali has been away for quite some time because of school. So I completely understand, guys. But thank you so much for the love and support. I do appreciate it a great deal, more than you can think of. So anyways, that's what has happened. Of course, maybe what I would tip on is who are some of the title favorites in this tournament. You say, Daniel says, I support Liverpool. What about you? I do support football first. Football is love entirely. Before, allegiances to club come in, it's football first. And then I do support Arsenal. I do pay allegiance to Real Madrid. Okoyo Amlen, does the tournament stream on any network? I'm particularly not sure, but Uganda's fixtures or games have been shown on the Federation TV. I've not seen any streaming platforms that offer those games. So I do not know. You may have to keep searching around and see if you could get lucky in accessing some of those games. But I think, I do not know, maybe as we advance in the later stages of the competition, that's when maybe some of the streaming platforms may look to bring on board games, because let's be honest, while there's a lot of football fans out there, I'm not sure there's so many people outside respective countries that would have sat to, let's say, watch Uzbekistan against Paraguay. No offense to either of those teams, that would have maybe sat to watch Saudi Arabia and against Mali, unless you're from Mali or you're from Saudi Arabia, it's not many people that you would assume that would sit to engage in that kind of game. Football Royale, uh, what do you think? Okay. Uh, so this one says, who do you think will win the tournament? Let's get to that. Then I think England. That's Daniel Tuton giving his prediction. Mr. Tribe, how are you, bro? I'm all right. Good to have you back, Football Royale. I keep kissing your stream. Thank you so much. It's been a minute. I hadn't seen you in a bit. So, looking at some of the favorites to win this competition. Of course, Germany are the reigning champions, having won it in 2023. And then now you have, although they did not do well, I think, in the Euros. And then, but of course, Argentina is one of the countries to look at. Portugal is one of those the countries that you should keep an eye on. England. England have been doing well in their underage tournaments. We know, I think they won, was it the under 21 Euros recently? So in their unders, competitions, they've not been doing so bad. So they are always one of those teams to look at. I would say while Germany have not been at their very best, do not rule them out entirely. We know Germany to be a very good tournament, kind of team. When it comes to competitions like this, when you get to tournaments like this, they always step up. Sometimes they may have to crawl their way up the ladder, but they always get to step up. Somebody says, I'm trying to read your comments as we also, continue with the stream with my submissions. You say, okay, I think England, France, even Spain is good. France, I'm not so convinced. I looked at their performance against the Uganda Cubs today, and I did not watch the entirety of the game, but I managed to catch a glimpse of that game. But they did not look convincing. Unless they will grow into the tournament, like for example, we saw perhaps Spain do when they won the World Cup in 2010. You remember they got beat in their opening fixture against Switzerland. Was it by 0-0? That game, they lost that game. The reason as why I cannot forget that game, by the way, why when Spain lost, is I had placed a bet on that game that Spain would win, and they disappointed us. And then they went on to win until they lifted the tournament. So I'm hoping that maybe France do grow into the competition. Football Royale says even Spain is good. Would you start Nico O'Reilly or Lewis Skelly for England? I think I would go with Lewis Skelly. I do not know if this is based on two reasons. I find Lewis Skelly defensively better. I find him more physically solid compared to Nico O'Reilly, but they're both good players. There's not so much that differentiates the two in terms of those. Then Football Royale says, if Merino starts as a striker for Spain, he will win the Golden Boot. Why are you black? That is Black Rose asking. Funny that you're called Black Rose and you're asking, why am I black? That's the nature. I'm naturally black. It is what it is. Anyways, but I hope you meant that in the most subtle of ways that for which I take it in the context of that regard. So for me, those are some of the favorites, unless you have anybody to add. Brazil is one of those countries. Brazil is one of those countries. So you cannot really write them off. So they're one of those teams that can beat up against, any of these teams. So, and then Mexico. Mexico usually has very young, good players. In the context of Africa, I would say between Mali and Senegal. Senegal have been doing well in some of these junior tournaments as well. Morocco haven't looked too bad. Morocco have looked good. I forgot about Brazil. Yes, Football Royale acknowledges you forgot about Brazil. So clearly, I'd go Brazil, I'd go Portugal, I'd go Argentina, I'd go England, I'd go Mexico, India, in no particular order, by the way. I'd go with Mali, Senegal from the African continent, perhaps even more Morocco, to go perhaps until the quarterfinals, maybe. Like I said, I won't rule out France, even though they didn't look so good. I want to really, really rule them out. And then maybe the Asian champions, Uzbekistan, they could be another team to watch out. How long is it? Oh, somebody's asking. Black Rose says, how long is it? Please answer me. How long? How long is what? I do not understand your question. Black Rose, how long is what? What do you think about the new World Cup? I think it's going to be exciting. The World Cup has always been that kind of tournament that sort of matures really quickly. If I'm being honest, I can't say I was one of the advocates for increased representation, but I have no qualms whatsoever against it. One, whereas for most people they think it will dilute the quality of the tournament, I would say, and I would say, give football a chance. Give football a chance to grow, to thrive, and then to get more surprises on the scene. Because what football does, how many wives do you have? Jesus Christ. Why do you even have to use a plural? What if I don't have any? What if I have 10? What if I have 2? But anyways, that's a private matter, so I won't answer that question. Please accept my apologies on that. So anyways, so the 48 teams football royale, for me, in my opinion, I look at it in the sense that, one, perhaps we get a chance to see teams that have narrowly not been making it, but also it increases the possibility of us having some dark horses in the tournament. But then also it increases on the number of games. I think it also increases on the number of followership of the brand of the FIFA World Cup. We know it's the biggest football tournament there is in the world of football. But when you have the more increased number of countries in participation, the more people that are going to watch it. Now, for most people, of course, they would care how their teams perform, but the thing they care most about will be that their teams have, been represented at the World Cup. So let's be honest. It took until 2022 at the FIFA World Cup 2022 for us to see an African team qualify for the semifinals for the first time. That was Morocco. Of course, they got knocked out, and eventually Argentina won it when they beat up against France. So the 48 teams, I have no qualms whatsoever. I'm just looking forward to it to see how it transpires. Now, my only upside this time round, and it has nothing to do with the number of teams, it has to do with the time of games. I don't know if you've noticed, but games, they've yet to be decided. But some of these games are likely to be in the wee hours of the night or very, very early in the morning. So that means fan participation in terms of being in those stadiums, or, okay, maybe the stadiums will be okay. But in terms for the rest of the world, given the differences in time, we may not have the opportunity to watch as much football as we can. So, for example, assume you're going to be working during the course of the summer, or you have a sort of what we call an AM to PM kind of job, or even if you have night shifts. So, if the earliest kickoff game is going to come at let's say at 6 p.m. because they're looking at hours like 10, they're looking at hours like 1 a.m., they're looking at hours like 4 a.m. So that means if you have one game kicking off at around 8 p.m. or 6 p.m., you'll watch the 6 p.m. game, you'll watch the 10 p.m. game, and possibly go to bed so that you can be fresh the following day to go to your, other routine, That means you miss 2 games that will be played at 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. So because of the differences in time, that could impact on the overall global viewership of the tournament itself. So maybe that's my only reservation, but I'm definitely really looking forward to it to see what it has to offer. We're going away from about 63 games to 63, 64 games. There are about that too, about 103 games, or there are, So I'm really, really looking forward to it. And also, given that somebody at one time we were debating this still about the World Cup, and they made the suggestion that somebody made the suggestion that that the World Cup should be played every 2 years, and I disagreed with him, and I said one of the reasons as why we really look forward to it is because it takes 4 years to come around. We have an entire 3 years of looking forward to the next tournament. Because part of one of those years is the qualifiers, and then we get to the actual tournament. So, and then also given the overall context of global football in terms of other continental tournaments where you have the Euros that also come every 4 years, you have AFCON that comes every 2 years in the odd years, then you have the Copa America and things like that, the Asian Cup. So if you reduce the World Cup to becoming every 2 years, I find that we could suffocate on football. There's something as a little too much, so it would be too much football. So and also in terms of how would it work whenever, because you do just imagine being an African team, you play in AFCON, then the subsequent year you play World Cup, then the subsequent year you're playing AFCON again, and the subsequent year you're playing World Cup, but in between there you have qualifiers. So I think it just wouldn't make too much sense. Okay, let me get back to some of your comments. What do you think about the new World Cup? I've responded to that. How many? Okay, I excuse myself of that question. Also, now that they expanded the number of teams, why are they still not allowing more African countries at the World Cup? To answer that question, there's going to be more African teams. Usually we had 5 teams. Now those slots have been expanded to 9 and possibly 10. How do they get because you have 9 groups for the Africa World Cup qualifiers? We had 9 groups, and every top team out of each group did qualify directly for the World Cup. 9 teams go straight now to the World Cup. Now, the 4 teams that finish second best across the 9 groups get to have a mini playoff. And Nigeria will be up against Gabon, while Congo will be up against oh Jesus Christ, I'm forgetting. I don't know why it keeps eluding me. DRC Congo are going to be up against who? Is it Cameroon? I stand to be corrected, but there is a playoff. And in that playoff, if somebody remembers it off their fingertips, please put it for me down in the comment section. So in that playoff, they'll play, it's more like you play each other once, whoever wins goes to what would be like the final for the continent, and whoever wins then goes to the intercontinental playoff. So, for example, you'll have maybe a team from Africa, from Europe, and from Asia, and that meet in the final playoff, to decide. So if an African team wins that playoff, then we get 10 teams qualifying from Africa. If it's a European team, that means Europe has gotten more places in that regard. I hope that answers that question about the African countries. Africa have some of the strongest teams in the world. Yes, and I think next year we are really looking forward to what countries like Morocco will do. Can they repeat what they did in 2022? Can Senegal try and better their own record when they reached the quarterfinals in 2002? You remember on their journey, them beating up against France in one of their games. I think they got knocked out by Turkey at the quarterfinals. Turkey, who advanced to the semifinals then and got knocked out by Brazil before Brazil met Germany in the finals. Then you look at countries like Cameroon, you look at countries like Egypt, you look at countries like Tunisia, who qualified directly. Tunisia, the 2004 AFCON champions. You look at those countries and think to yourself, maybe there's a chance here for us to get there. So in terms of the African teams that qualify directly, among them is Egypt, Senegal, South Africa, Cape Verde, Morocco, Ivory Coast. You have Algeria, you have Tunisia, you have Ghana. those are the teams that qualified directly for the World Cup in the context of the African continent. Black Rose says, bro, how are you gonna siok about only football? It's called Football Tribe. It's a football channel. Apologies if you misunderstood what the channel is about, but yes, when there are major sporting events or major achievements from other sporting disciplines, we may talk about them briefly on the channel for purposes of recognition, but it's a football channel, so we talk about football. At least 99%, it's football. So unless you thought otherwise. But if there's something you would want us to discuss, put it down in the comment section, and if I have knowledge about it, I'll comment about it. The other day, I had somebody, a subscriber on the channel, request me to talk about cricket. They are from India, and I know how much Indians love cricket, but I do not have the expertise to talk about cricket. My knowledge about cricket is very minimal, so I did not want to insult his intelligence by fumbling and gambling about the sport that he loves so much. So I'll be honest with you and let you know that I do not, have the forte for that kind of thing. Then Football Rare says it's right. The World Cup can never work if it's only 2 years. It takes excitement and the meaning of the world away, of the World Cup away. I certainly agree with you on that one. A top scorer for the World Cup prediction, that takes us back to your earlier submission where you said if Spain start with Mikel Merino up front, then he could probably win the Golden Boot. Now, the thing about the World Cup Golden Boot is always there for the taking because it's not the kind of Golden Boot where you need to score 20 goals to win it. Of course, given the change in tournament in terms of size, in the increased number of teams, it may take more than just 5 goals, 6 goals that we've been accustomed to for strikers to score, or sometimes even 4, for you to win the Golden Boot. Mikel Merino winning it with Spain, I wouldn't argue against that. He's proven time and again that he's capable of scoring. He scored. Sometimes he scores for fun. Sometimes he scores and you think he's a striker, and yet he's naturally not. We know him to be a central midfielder, So if Spain go deeper in the tournament, I think he will be one of the standout performers for Spain in the tournament. If the qualifiers and the UEFA Nations League are anything to go by. You remember he did score against France in the semi-finals of the UEFA Nations League. So he's that kind of guy that has an eye for goal. He does pop up in the right places when he's played in that role. The qualities that he does have overall are not that of a striker. But what makes him have that sort of niche is he has that eye for goal, and if we are being honest, he does not miss loads of chances. So because he's not a traditional number 9 or striker, he's not going to stay in that zone of a striker waiting for the ball to come to him. He's going to be always running around depending on what the requirements from his manager will be. And sometimes he pops up late in certain positions. But every time he gets a chance, he does not need too many chances to score. So I wouldn't really against the possibility of him even winning the Golden Boot if Spain can go deep in the tournament. But I think also if players like Brad Erling Haaland go with the kind of form that they do have already through the qualifiers and through their domestic leagues where they are playing, particularly in the Premier League for Brad Erling Haaland, where he's already scored 14 goals in 11 games, then he would be one of the guys to watch. Harry Kane, we know what he's been doing at Bayern Munich this season, scoring goals for fun, literally partaking in every piece of action that Bayern Munich have done right in terms of scoring goals this season. Him and Luis Diaz and Michael Olise have been really, really getting things done in that regard. So if he carries on that form, he will be one of the guys to watch in terms of the World Cup. Germany, I do not know. In the absence of Kai Havertz, you struggle to think of who are they going to rely on predominantly when it comes to their goals. If Argentina return with Lionel Messi, we cannot not rule him out. France with Kylian Mbappe. Now, France is one of those teams that has, I think, arguably the most talented forwards, or in terms of depth and quality, so far in Europe or even in global football. Because when you look at their front line, you look at Kylian Mbappe, you look at Rando Kolomwani, you look at Marcus Thuram, you look at players like Michael Olise, you look at Desli Doué, Ousmane Dembele, you look at Bradley Bacola, all those are French players, Or that's, you look at players playing in behind the strikers roles, like Rancheki. I mean, these are guys that have been scoring goals. If last season and coming into this season are anything to go by. So you look at that kind of depth, and they're really, really it. And I think it was Arsene Wenger who recently mentioned it and said that if you're building a team, today France has the best forwards, Spain has the best midfielders, and South America has the best defenders. That's how he summarized it up. I do not know who has the best goalkeepers, but, so when you look at those respective departments, I think it's really, really hard to argue against him. It's not to say that there's no talent within other countries or other areas, but at least predominantly, those are the ones that do have the talent. So Kylian Mbappe would be one of those players that you'd think about. Then for Brazil, by the way, given that Uganda Cranes has never qualified for the World Cup, I've always been a Brazil fan whenever we go to the World Cup. But we know that Brazil over the years has sort of declined, really, really declined from the kind of Brazil that we did enjoy in 2002. For those of you that watched the World Cup in South Korea and Japan, and then subsequently the World Cup in Germany in 2006, because I remember, I think they got knocked out by France. France who advanced to the finals and got beat by Italy on penalties. We remember the game particularly, predominantly because of the indiscipline of Zinedine Zidane, who headbutted Marco Materazzi, and then, of course, Italy winning on penalties, and then that same year, 2006, Fabio Cannavaro going on to win the Ballon d'Or. So, really, really, that kind of impressive stuff. Football Royale also makes a submission and say, and your World Cup final predictions say Spain versus England. Wouldn't you want it to be Spain versus England? Why would you want a repeat of the 2024 Euro finals? Because already England got beat by 2-1 in that finals. Now, I think I wouldn't rule out that kind of final, but I do not want to be quick to reach that conclusion because, bro, I will say it again, you need to become a pundit. Thank you so much for your kindness, Football Royale. But briefly, back on Spain versus England, or my prediction for the World Cup. I'll say this. It's a little premature for me to predict who will make it to the final before I get to know, because the draws have not yet even been conducted. We do not know who is going to be in what group, and yet we know that has an impact on whether you advance even out of the group stage or not. Then two, we do not know whether the kind of squads that some of these players are going to carry through to the World Cup. Now, right now, for example, if you ask me about England, I could give you sort of a shell of a structure of a squad that they could take. I could talk about France, we could talk about Spain, we could talk about Brazil, and things like that. But until the season ends and we know in what status it has ended for some players, we know that players go into the summer with injuries and they miss out even on preseason tours and things like that, and preseason tournaments. So until we get to that point when we know what kind, for example, England have a very decent squad. One, they have a very good manager who knows how to galvanize a team. He knows how to play tactical football to win in these kind of tournament games. But until he gets to read out his squad, because right now he has the kind of squad where you have Ezri Kosa in your backline, you have all these Bukayo Saka, Ebeleche Eze, if Noni Madueke is available, could be him. Lewis Skelly wasn't someone this time around because he's told him he needs more playing time. It could be a Phil Foden. It could be, Jordan Henderson in that midfield, who is someone, again, you look at the goalkeepers, Jordan Pickford, Nick Pope, and I think the other was James Trafford, was it? that was summoned at the expense of the likes of Aaron Ramsdale. So, oh no, actually it was Dean Henderson of Crystal Palace. Dean Henderson of Crystal Palace. So until we get there, because it could come unfortunate for England that most of their most reliable stars, the likes of Cole Palmer, perhaps, like you've added there, a Hurricane, that by the time we get to the tournament, they've unfortunately suffered injuries that forbid them from participating, or that sort of restrain them from going to the World Cup. And then suddenly you look at England going into the World Cup with a bit of a lightweight squad as opposed to what they would have. So let's not be. I don't want to quickly rush and say this will be the teams in the finals. But in the context of the example that you've given, that Spain versus England, again, I wouldn't argue too much against it, because they are arguably one of the best teams that there is, because Spain is the best team in Europe by the virtue of the fact that they won the Euros 2024, and then England were the losing finalists. And let's be honest, that was their second consecutive Euro finals, having lost to Italy back in 2020, that was played in 2021. So Brazil have fallen so far off. We do not know in what shape Argentina are going to return. It's not very often that a team wins the World Cup back to back, So we do not know in what kind of French team we will have. Not in terms of quality, but in terms of actual participation in the tournament. You remember that France won the World Cup in '98. I think they beat up against Brazil. But when they came back in 2002, they could not make it out of the group stages. So you remember it happened to Spain when they won the World Cup in 2010 in South Africa, beating up against Netherlands by 1-0 in the finals. That goal scored by Iniesta with assist Fabregas providing the assist. When they came to the World Cup in 2014 in Brazil, where my own Brazil team got humiliated at the expense of Germany, you remember Spain getting beat, was it 4-1 at the hands of Netherlands? They couldn't make it out of the group stages, Was it Vicente Del Bosque still in charge of Spain? He couldn't take them past that stage. We particularly remember that victory, that loss for Spain against Netherlands because of Robin van Persie's flying header, So anything can happen. Anything can happen at a tournament, Sometimes the teams that we thought were going to be the key conversation makers have gone on to not to deliver on the expectations that we've laid upon their shoulders. One of the teams that we've seen over the years in that frame has been Belgium. Belgium, at some point, has had the hottest of talents that there is within Europe. Speaking of a goalkeeper like Thibaut Courtois, Toby Alderweireld in their defense, Jan Vertonghen, Thomas Vermaelen, former Arsenal defender in Barcelona. You look at Kevin De Bruyne, you look at Eden Hazard, you look at Romelu Lukaku, you look at Thorgan Hazard, Axel Witsel, you look at Nacer Chadli, you look at that sort of composition of squad that they did have, and you thought, why did they not go so far in tournaments? I think at one point they only reached the semifinals, and that was it. And I've since part ways with Roberto Martinez, and of course he went on to the Portuguese national team. So we will see what happens. Then you put a question about Nick Voltmada is a good striker for Germany. Yeah, Nick Voltmada is a good striker for Germany. I think he's had a good start to his career with Newcastle. Things have not particularly happened well for Newcastle in as far as the Premier League is concerned, but they've been doing well in Europe, where, by the way, he does not score too many, Nick Voltmada, but in the Premier League he's popped up with some brilliant goals for which sort of have helped him ease into life within the Premier League and the UK as well as an overall. And he's still a young striker, 23 years of age, so he's a good guy. I thank you so much for bringing that name back to the forefront. You said, bro, okay, I read that comment. What do you think about the disallowed goal in the Liverpool match? Now, for me, it was very, very questionable, and because the argument is Robertson is an offside position. That is without debate. But does he interfere with play? Does he show interest in the ball? No, he simply ducks to let the ball pass. And depending on what angle you're shown, because, I don't know if you've noticed this about the Premier League. Sometimes when they are passing judgment during the course of the match, they will not show you exhaustive angles. They'll show you an angle or two to justify a certain narrative. And then when the game ends and you get to see all angles, then you realize, how come the VAR officials did not look at all these angles and, make the correct decision or guide the referee into making the right decision? Because their role is to guide the referee to make the right decision. It's not their decision to make anyway. So, because when I looked at different angles, in terms of line of vision for Gianluigi Donnarumma, I thought he had a clear sight of that ball. He just could not dive and reach there enough to prevent that ball from hitting the back of the net. So for me, that goal should have stood. That goal should have stood. Now, we had a similar incident, I think, in an Arsenal game last season. Was it against Newcastle? I stand to be corrected, but it was last season, and Arsenal wrote to the pitch mall, are complaining. And Yemi Carragher, a former Liverpool, defender and legend, was one of those that came to the scrutiny of Arsenal to criticize them for literally calling them crybabies, So, and I said this, it's easier to justify bad decisions if they are not happening to your team. But if you're objective enough, you'll know that bad decisions will affect everyone eventually. Now, also the unfortunate bit for this particular case is, guess who the fourth official was? Michael Oliver. And what team was he helping officiate? Manchester City. The same side, he refused to award a penalty against just a season, was it a season or two ago? You remember that high boot of Alexis McAllister on Jeremy Doku in the box, and he did not give a penalty. And I do not remember what the justification was for hard way, but it had something to do with not wanting to ruin the game. The rules are the rules. Apply them fairly and squarely. That was a clear and obvious penalty, possibly a red card incident. We also remember him not awarding a red card to, was it Mateo Kovacic for, his tackles against Martin Odegaard in one of the Arsenal games against Manchester City. So because it's Michael Oliver and everything with that, a lot of controversy comes with it. But for me, the goal should have stood. Gianluigi Donnarumma had good sight of the ball. Andy Robertson does not make a dash to play the ball. He simply darts to, move away from the path of the ball, and the goal should have stood. So I certainly agree with Liverpool that they feel aggrieved that that goal wasn't given. But also, it wasn't the first time we've seen a goal ruled out, and they themselves, Pitchmore, came back to say that goal should have stood. I'll remind you, remember, I think it was the 2023-2024 campaign, Gabriel Martinelli scores a goal against Manchester United away because Man United went on to win that game by 3-1. And that goal is cancelled. The game was still 0-0, so he scores the first goal of the game, and it is ruled out as offside. We finished the game, and they say they made the wrong decision, So I think it was a bad decision. Every decision that divides opinion is often a bad decision, because decisions of football should often have unanimity in about the argument. Forget the 50-50s, or usually where you have challenges, penalty or no penalty. Now, again, within the same game, the penalty awarded to Manchester City at the expense of Liverpool for a foul on Jeremy Doku. Arsenal fans were looking at that and saying, look, wait, hold on. Remember what happened to us against Newcastle? That penalty that was awarded to us, and VAR thought that the referee had made a clear and obvious error, so they called him to the monitor to change his decision against Victor Gyökeres, Nick Pope versus Victor Gyökeres. How come that wasn't a penalty and this is a penalty? So the lack of consistency in those decisions also is affecting our opinions about the Premier League. Then you say, okay, I will see you in the next live, bro. I'll keep going. The same thing happened last season with Liverpool versus City, and they gave the goal. Exactly. And these things keep happening. Unfortunately, I do not know, and I do not want this to be a conspiracy theory of some sort. But Manchester City have been quite suspect in a couple of these decisions in terms of some of these decisions going their way. You remember the penalty that United conceded against Man City, apparently for a tag on Rodri. And then suddenly, it did not become standard that every time there's a tag on a player within the box, it will be a penalty. So the pitch mole needs to work on itself to be more consistent with their decisions. I, for one, sitting in this chair, I've always wondered, do Premier League referees after every game week, do they go back and revisit and scrutinize themselves on what were controversial decisions and say, okay, going forward, this is going to be the standard? Do they actually do that? Do they self-critique? Do they self-analyze to say, okay, if I rewatch, I do not know, when referees sit back, do they rewatch some of the games they officiate to say that I think I was wrong in that moment? I'm not saying they shouldn't forgive themselves for making some of these mistakes, but given the inconsistencies of their decisions, we question whether they go back and self-assess. In any case, you and I are not perfect. I make errors in this kind of work. You make certain errors in your sphere of life. But every time I do a broadcast or I shoot a video, I go back and self-critique and I say, okay, maybe I had a slip of a tongue there. And in the subsequent video, even though it feels a little too late, I'll come back and correct and self-correct. That means I caught myself in the wrong in terms of not being correct. It could be a statistic that I gave a wrong figure of. And when I go back, I look at it and I'm like, oh, so it was 4, not 5. I self-correct so that I'm not continuously repeating the same mistake over and over again, in that sort of sense. So imagine if I come and give you a wrong statistic for 4 consecutive broadcasts about the same thing, every time because football information is readily available out there, you'll say, no. You keep telling us he scored this number of goals, but in actual sense, there were this number of goals. So if I do not go back and self-correct, then I won't improve. I won't be a better person at this, So I think referees, English referees, and the pitch more, I would want to think they do it because it's only basic that they do it. But some of the decisions that they make, the nature of the inconsistency of those decisions makes us feel like they are not assessing, to say every time we find ourselves in this kind of situation, this should be the standard of the decision, The same thing applies to handballs, There's a ball to hand. Of course, the ball to hand, it's no longer a thing as in the essence of a rule itself, but it's common sense to know where did the ball hit the player first before it went to their hand. Or you remember the Liverpool versus Real Madrid game, the free kick that had been awarded against Real Madrid at the edge of the box against Aurelio Tchouameni when he was attempting to put in a block. He's obviously going to the ground. Where do you expect his arms to be? Because in any motion of a human being, for as long as you have these 2 hands, they're going to be somewhere trying to offer you a certain level of support. If you're falling, you want to put your hands first, depending on from what height you're falling off, And in football, it's not like you're falling off, the crossbar to hit the floor. You jumped and you're falling. In this case, was putting in a block. You go back to the Newcastle game. So, and I liked it that the referee was somewhat to the monitor to review the incident, and it was not a penalty because there was a possibility that it could be a penalty, and it was not a free kick. So the free kick was not given. And then you go back to the game against Arsenal Newcastle. Gabriel Magalhaes handles the ball in the box when Anthony Elanga was attempting to put in a cross. But when you look at that ball, it hits on, I think, somewhere on his leg first before it hits his arm that was up in the air. If it had hit his arm straight away without hitting any part of his body, while his arm was that high in the air, then I would have no qualms it being awarded as a penalty. But the referee used his common sense to say, look here, the ball bounced off the player before it hit his hand, so we cannot give that as a penalty, So that was the correct decision. So they must continuously self-assess to make the right decisions. Now, staying within the realms of the international break and international football, Thomas Tuchel has come out to say that if Lewis Skelly wants to be part of the England squad for the World Cup, then he needs to get more playing time. And I understand what he's trying to say. I understand what he's trying to say. But let's not forget that he's talking about a 19-year-old who broke through last season in a very, very competitive team like Arsenal, where it's not every day that a 19-year-old gets to play week in, week out. We're not talking about an Arsenal of 2019, where Bukayo Saka was a mainstay in that team. That's not the kind of team we're talking about. We're not talking about the Arsenal of 2021, 2022, where you had a collection of young players being the driving force of this Arsenal side. In Emily Smith-Rowe, Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Martinelli, Martin Odegaard. No, that's not the team we're talking about. We're talking about a team that has matured because the manager has been building a project for now close on 6 years, because he turned 6 in December. He celebrates his 6th anniversary being in charge of Arsenal, So the project has matured to a stage where there's very, very little room for error. And he's trying to win titles. While at it, he must pick the best team available to him without any sentimental values or anything, So, and this has to do with nothing against Lewis Skelly, because I believe he's an excellent player. In any case, there's nothing he's done wrong for him to be justified being on the bench. He's only on the bench for majority of Arsenal's games because there's a player that is better than him, and that's Ricardo Carafiori. He's been excellent for Arsenal so far this season. One of the players that you could look and say, in the opening 11 fixtures in the Premier League, Ricardo Carafiori could be nominated as one of the Arsenal players of the season. Ricardo Carafiori, Yohan Timber, Martin Zubimendi, Declan Rice, that cohort, So it's unfortunate for him that Ricardo Carafiori is better. But also, he just has to sit around and wait for his chance, because we never know when Carafiori is going to suffer that injury that keeps him out for a period of a month or two, and then suddenly Lewis Skelly becomes the mainstay in that team. Basically, that's what happened last season. He was little known to many of us, and he broke through that team. And he put in, brilliant performances, week in, week out, So, whereas I understand where Thomas Tuchel is coming from, I do not think he needs to gaslight the situation. I'm sure as a manager, he also knows that Arteta can only play with one left back at a time. But also, when you look at the conversation, when you look at that news being reported by Sky Sports, I thought they were intellectually dishonest. And they did it deliberately. When the reporter is citing and saying Lewis Skelly has played less than 90 minutes in the Premier League this season, that's true. But what he does not mention in that same match, in that same report, is how many minutes he's played in the UEFA Champions League and in the few cup competition games, because there's only been 2 for Arsenal against Port Vale and Brighton and Hove Albion. So I felt that Sky Sport tried to drive a narrative in that short report to support Thomas Tuchel's, submission. I feel it's unfair, He's a 19-year-old. Yes, I understand he would love him in his team. Let him do what Gareth Southgate used to do. You remember when Harry Maguire was at his lowest at Manchester United, and yet every England squad that came out, Gareth Southgate had someone, Harry Maguire. Let him just go ahead and do that, Speaking of left backs, when you look around, by the way, England, they do not have many good left backs, if we are being honest, So he may have to swallow a bitter pill and take whatever minutes that Lewis Skelly can get himself at Arsenal. And I do not think that Arsenal are suddenly going to sanction a January transfer for Lewis Skelly on the basis that they want him to get more playing time that could chance him into playing at the World Cup. You could loan out him to a team that would prefer to play him in midfield and is predominantly playing in midfield. You take him as a midfielder or still as a left back. Anyways, that's a different whole debate. But because Arsenal know what the impact of injuries can be on a squad, I'm not sure they are going to sanction a move for Lewis Skelly in January, just so that to satisfy the intentions of Thomas Tuchel. I think Mikel Arteta is past that, or is not at the stage in his career where that can be a factor. He's thinking week in, week out, how do I help this team win major silverware? That will be his sole focus. And I thought I should read a submission for you guys by an Arsenal reporter called Charles Watts. He used to write for Goal, previously Football.London, and then also called Offside, I think a columnist there. He did say that Tuchel seemingly pressuring, he said, and I quote, Tuchel seemingly pressuring and potentially unsettling a 19-year-old kid who has had a remarkable amount of game time at the very highest level over the past 12 months is really not a good look, in my opinion. He says Lewis Skelly is 19. He is going to play plenty of minutes at his club, hopefully challenging for the best honors over the next few months. This is just rubbish. So looks like there's somebody that does not agree with Thomas Tuchel. And then somebody called the Gunners then says, let's not get this wrong. While I'm not trying to justify or make excuses for Tuchel, the bulk of the blame for trying to unsettle a young player squarely lie at the doorstep of Sky Sports Premier League. Their actions and fixation on Arsenal is getting ridiculous. I get that the playbook is a bait. I get that the playbook is to bait Arsenal fans for clicks and engagement, but spinning a non-existent transfer rumors that could affect a player's mindset isn't reporting, just sensationalism and shameless clickbait. So the Gunners then, speaking to the context of what I was saying, that I disagreed in the manner of reporting of the story by Sky Sport. As soon as I watched it, I disagreed with it. The manner of reporting. I thought they could have packaged that story much better. And then Luke Weiser, Seychelles, said he's 19 and doesn't need to get in the England squad consistently yet. Football fans need to stop putting on so much pressure on your youngsters. It's not the end of the world if they aren't in the England squad at 19. At 19, possibly you should be still playing for the under 21s, like Ethan Wanyeri has been doing. So in that sort of case, because, and by the way, when you look at the reporting of the media, so for example, if Mikel Arteta wakes up and is affording suddenly Lewis Skelly all the playing time, you will be surprised that then the focus will shift to maybe Max Doman, that is not getting enough playing time and things like that. So anyways, it is what it is. Now, there's some big news regarding Arsenal, and this is according to Sami Mokbel of BBC. He says in an exclusive, Arsenal are in advanced talks over appointing Napoli head of scouting, Maurizio Micheli, into a leading recruitment role. Micheli, credited with unearthing the likes of Marek Hamsik, Kim Min-jae, and Kivica Kvaratskhelia. So looks like Andre Bata is making his moves in terms of setting the pieces together to building Arsenal's future recruitment team that he's been part of since March when he got appointed as Arsenal sporting director, replacing the Edu Gaspar Dawood, who left the club. So that story brought on by BBC Sport. Anyways, I think we can call it a wrap. So guys, but before I call it a wrap, remember this. Remember this. We do our broadcasts every single night and morning at 9 a.m. and then at night at 11 p.m. But tomorrow, I may be unable to do this live broadcast because I have a morning engagement to get to, and I need to. So that may coincide between the time that I have to be traveling. So I may not do it. However, if there is a possibility of us doing it earlier, then we will do it earlier. So please take note of that. Just keep your notifications turned on so that in case time allows us to do it, we do it, however brief it could be. And then if not, we link up during the course of the day or in the evening. Otherwise, you've been such a wonderful audience. Thank you so much, Football Royale, for the wonderful conversation and engagement. Thank you so much, Black Rose. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Sophie O'Brien. It's been a pleasure. Daniel Tuton, it was nice, really, really nice seeing you once again. Same goes for Football Royale. Okoyo Amlen, thank you so much for being part of tonight's broadcast. And then Mola, thank you so much for being part of our broadcast tonight. Jesus Y815 says Manchester City 3-0 and puts exclamation marks. I think it means Manchester City's emphatic victory against Liverpool. Well, yeah, it was a statement victory for Manchester City. They outplayed Liverpool in all aspects of that game. I thought Liverpool struggled in the game. Apart from the cancelled goal for Liverpool from Virgil van Dijk in the first half, you have to go until after the 75th minute to find a Liverpool shot on target that was saved by Gianluigi Donnarumma. That shot coming from Dominic Szoboszlai. What's going on with Lamine? What do you mean what's going on? He's been okay. He scored in their 4-2 victory against Celta Vigo over the weekend. I do not know of anything that has happened to him in between since that result, but he's been okay. Maybe in terms of away from football, he's not playing for Spain. Well, that's a decision of the manager to decide who plays and who doesn't play. So, in the aftermath of the El Clasico, many people were advising him to perhaps talk a little less than he often opens his mouth. But it is the nature of celebrityhood and football and entertainment as a whole, or sporting disciplines. It's up to his minders and handlers, his agent, to keep him in check in that regard. But for more thoughts about the Manchester City game, you can also go to the channel under the video section. We did put out a video saying why Manchester City will be Arsenal's biggest title rivals. We also take bites in that one. And then also, when you look at, when you go under the live broadcasts on our channel, you will find many, many reviews of that game, or in which, but particularly, you'll find whole discussions emanating from match day 11 of the Premier League and elsewhere around Europe in as far as things are concerned. Drink water, mate. I will. I always have my bottle here. I always have my bottle with me here. So anyways, thank you so much for that input as well. Just to maybe summarize it up, the victory for Man City against Liverpool, like I said, was a statement victory. Pretty puts Manchester City back into the title conversation. It's not to say that they are guaranteed of winning it, but it also sort of puts Liverpool out of the title conversation. Not mathematically, but by measure of their own results, or based on how things have gone in recent times. When you look at the last 7 games, but in the Premier League alone, they've lost 5 games in a space of 6 games. That doesn't look pretty. And you do not, it's very rare that you get to compete for a Premier League title when you've lost 5 games by just mid-November, really. In a Premier League season, because then the question is, how many more can you afford to lose for you to be to clinch the title? So that's something there. Please look up the situation with Lamine Yamal and Spain. Okay, I'll look it up, Jesus, and we'll discuss it perhaps in the morning or in tomorrow night. Just endeavor, please endeavor to be with us tomorrow night at 11 p.m. East African time, and we'll look into that situation and see. I'm going to take note of it so that I do not forget to look into the situation of Lamine Yamal with Spain. Situation of Lamine Yamal with Spain. So I'll definitely come back with feedback for you on that front. Are Uganda qualifying for the World Cup? The main event, no, they're not qualifying. They did not qualify for the playoffs. They were not among the best 4 teams that finished second in their group, in their respective groups for the World Cup qualifiers. But the junior Uganda, that's the under 17 team for Uganda, which is called the Uganda Cubs, did qualify for the ongoing, FIFA Under 17 World Cup that is being played in Qatar. And today they beat up against France by a goal to nil to advance to the round of 32 for that tournament. So that's what I can tell you about that situation in regards to Uganda. But thank you so much, Jesus. So do you pronounce your name as Jesus or Jesus? When you go in South America, the name is pronounced as Jesus. I remember when I was reading the name James Rodriguez, and South Americans were pronouncing it as James Rodriguez, But thank you so much. You say I'm JY. Okay, all right, JY. It's been a pleasure doing this with you. Guys, allow me get to other duties and engagements. It's pronounced Jesus. Jesus. Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for the lecture on the pronunciation. Guys, let's link up again tomorrow and do this. You've been a wonderful audience to me. Thank you so much, Team India, Team Indonesia, Team Uganda, and every single one of you across the globe that tunes into the Football Tribe UG channel, to our usual suspects that tune in every single day, morning, and evening, for the semi-irregular suspects that come that do appear every once and then, every time they have a moment to spare. We do appreciate your love and support. And then for our recent new subscribers, thank you so much for helping build our community. And like I've told you guys, we are trying to pursue the 4,000 hours of watch time. That's a goal. We need to accumulate 4,000 hours of watch time in a space of 1 year for us to monetize this channel. That's the goal. There's no secret to it. So please, any effort that you take to watch our content, our live broadcasts, our videos, our the live broadcasts that finished and you go back and you watch them, we really, really appreciate your time that you take. Otherwise, stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.